Hello everyone, you have come to Tata Comic Preview channel. Let read together. Have fun. Zhou glanced at Zhu Gong. That news surprised him. Within 3 months, not only did Zhu Gong manage to quell the rampaging energy in his body, but he had also entered the nascent divinity tribulation realm. That was no small feat. He casually waved his hand, and the barrier vanished, indicating Zhu Gong was free to leave the cave of reflection. Zhu Gong was overjoyed. He kowtowed and said, "Thank you, Master. You're truly magnanimous, and your might knows no bounds. May you live forever and ever." What a blatant attempt at flattery. Those who heard it felt their scalps tingle. Just how shameless was Zhu Gong that he was able to utter such words without a change in his expression. Zhou was pleased when he saw Zhu Gong's loyalty rising. Zhu Gong left the cave of reflection and walked to the other side. Zhou looked at Yuan'er. Name, Yuan'er. Identity, nobleman, human or realm, nascent divinity tribulation realm, restricted. These were the information he gleaned when he first met Yuan'er. He was neither intrigued nor shocked by this. Yuan'er was weirded out by Zhou's gaze. He lowered his head and said, "Master." Zhou faced Yuan'er and did something shocking. He cupped his fists at Yuan'er and said, "I'm not worthy." Yuan'er was astonished. Yuan'er had never seen his master bow to anyone, ever. All these years, his master had been an existence that was lofty and looked down on all other life forms from above. Why was his master saying such words? His master's words genuinely startled him. He immediately fell to one knee and rested his fists on the ground. His eyes were fixed on the ground as well. Although he felt much pride having his master salute him, he did not think he could take it. Zhou did not move. He looked at Yuan'er, who had fallen to one knee, as he stroked his beard and said, "Sometimes, unneeded pride will only hurt you." "It's in a sword's nature to be cold and arrogant," Yuan'er replied. His eyes were still trained on the ground. "Overconfidence is no different from being conceited, and conceit will blind you. Do you really think your sword skills are peerless?" Zhou asked tonelessly. "I don't dare claim that," Yuan'er replied in a low voice. "No, you do." Zhou raised his voice. When Zhou raised his voice, they felt their hearts tightened. They did not even dare to breathe heavily. They were wondering how this great villain would discipline this disciple. They were curious about how he was going to discipline this genius swordsman. "I dare not," Yuan'er said in a low voice again. "Stand up and speak." Yuan'er was slightly stunned. Based on his master's previous temper, he should have been heavily punished. Why did his master suddenly change? He suddenly remembered what his 7th junior brother said. There were 100 questions in his mind at this moment. He slowly rose to his feet. Zhou said, "Bring your sword here." He did not wish to use unnamed. He kept his right hand raised and waited for the sword. The others exchanged glances. Zhou Jifeng was the only elite here who used a sword. If he did not even have a small amount of tact, he would have spent his time here in vain. He quickly drew his sword and placed it in Zhou's hand. Zhou raised the sword. The sunlight glinted off the blade. "Since you call me your master, I want to see how much my disciple has improved." Yuan'er had a frightened expression on his face. He did not dare to unsheath his longevity sword. When Zhou saw Yuan'er remained motionless, he cried out before he thrust the sword forward. He did not use his primal qi. His sword moved nimbly like a dancing dragon. Perhaps, it was due to the sword's poor material, it seemed a bit brittle when Zhou wielded it. However, it did not detract one from seeing how complicated and unpredictable his movements were. Yuan'er's expression grew darker. He could underestimate everyone but not his master. He had instantly recognized his master's move. It was a skill from the Guiyuan sword technique, the technique he was most skilled in. Retreat. Quickly retreat. He reached for his longevity sword and swung it. There was only one possible outcome from the clash between a heaven-grade weapon and a lesser weapon. Swoosh. Lu Zhou's sword vibrated vertically and dodged the longevity sword at a peculiar angle. He loosened his grip. Charge. He sent the sword flying. Bam. It was pinned onto the wall behind Yu Shangrong, barely half an inch from his neck. One move. His master had only used one move to defeat him. The entire process took no longer than a few breaths. The magnitude of the difference between them was unimaginable. Yu Shangrong had difficulty accepting this. His fingers tightened around the longevity sword. His knuckles whitened. Defeating Yu Shangrong with the sword meant crushing Yu Shangrong's pride. There was nothing more effective than this. This was Lu Zhou's objective all along. Hua Wudao nodded as he said, in terms of experience, the pavilion master is clearly superior. In terms of technique, it seems like the pavilion master is more powerful as well. Mr. Second relies too much on his longevity sword. He thought that he could break the weapon, but he was wrong. Lang Luo said, that's not all. One has to be able to defy conventions with one's weapon. A sword isn't only a sword. At appropriate times, it can be a saber or a hidden weapon. Lu Zhou had used the sword as a hidden weapon by tossing it out. The problem was most cultivators controlled their weapons with primal qi. Hence, there was practically no chance for them to encounter such a situation. Indeed, Yu Shangrong had many combat experiences. He was no stranger to life-or-death battles. The only experience he lacked was fights of this kind. It was only normal that he was defeated. After defeating Yu Shangrong, Lu Zhou placed his hands on his back and asked, "Is this your sword path?" Yu Shangrong could not speak. He felt the attack earlier was full of openings. He had hundreds, even thousands of ways, to parry it, and yet, he chose the dumbest way. He knew that he would lose, but he never thought that he would lose in such a simple manner. His master was old and was using a crude weapon. However, his master had easily bested him even though he was in prime and was wielding the longevity sword. His master's skills were clearly superior to his. Zhu Honggong exclaimed excitedly, "Your might knows no bounds, master. Your sword skills are unmatched." The years, before he could finish his sentence, he felt the peculiar stares from the crowd. They looked at him as though he was a fool.